Great afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our HR and Professional Committee's second webinar of the season, this one on building a change-ready culture. I think you're off. We're going to have a great session today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to all questions, so even if we don't answer them today, the panelists will take those questions and respond to you. So please do put your questions in the chat. I'm Aaron Tandy. I am the pleasure to be the chair of our HR and Professional Committee here at the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. Without further much ado, I do want to, though, thank Barry University for providing SHRM credits and Tiffany Malvin of our committee for making that happen all the time. I know we're going to be off to an exciting discussion today. But first, I'd like to turn it over briefly to our presenting sponsor at CareerSource and Diana Valdivia, who is our business service manager and a member of our committee. Diana?
Good afternoon, everybody. Diana Valdivia here with CareerSource South Florida, Business Services Manager. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee, the HR Professional Committee, as well as the Chamber for having CareerSource as a sponsor to this wonderful topic that we're having today. So like I said, Diana Valdivia here, Business Services Manager with CareerSource South Florida. Happy to be here, and CareerSource South Florida is your local workforce development board. Basically, what we do is we provide assisted, funded, state and federal funded services to the business community. So if your business is looking to upskill your current employees, you're looking to hire new employees, we have incentive programs. We have programs that will provide your business with cost savings for hiring, recruiting, upskilling, even apprenticeship programs. With that said, with today's topic of building a culture, building culture ready, we have AI programs. As we all know, AI is now basically it's a evolution of tech and how it can assist your businesses. We have apprenticeship programs in AI and with our training providers. So if that's also something that your business is looking to incorporate into your business to keep up with the times and basically your business can be more efficient as well, please feel free, reach out to us, CareerSource South Florida. Again, my name is Diana Valdivia, Business Services Manager. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Diana. I also want to mention that CareerSource is a great place if you have people who have been displaced because of the hurricanes. They're out there helping those businesses regroup, and they do a wonderful job. So hats off to CareerSource and all of their efforts. At the moment, I'd like to turn it over briefly to Gladys Reed, who is a Senior Vice President at Ocean Bank, but she is also here at the Chamber, the chair of the Senior Executive Orientation Program. Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I apologize that my camera is not on. I'm actually in the office, but of course I couldn't get the technology to work. You know how that goes. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on your webinar. I'm just gonna take a few minutes. I feel like I'm crashing the HR party, but again, I appreciate the invitation. The reason that I wanted to join the call today is because my current job, I should start by saying, is the Senior Vice President for Ocean Bank, but I'm currently the chair of the Senior Executive Orientation Program. And for some of you might have heard about the programs, others might not be too sure. So let me give you like a high-level overview of it. So this program that has been coordinated through the Chamber for many, many years, since the late 1980s. In fact, our Chamber's fearless leader, Alfred Sanchez, went through the program when he actually came and was part of Red Cross way back when from Baltimore. So he always talks about the program and how beneficial it was for him to really start and embark his career and his personal life in Miami. So after COVID, this is not a program that definitely works through COVID. We revamped it in 2022. And since that time, we have we've had 5 cohorts. Over 123 alumni have gone through the program. And currently, we just finished the last fall cohort this year, and we had 36 participants that went through it. I will add that there was a contract through Miami-Dade County that funded the program after COVID. Obviously, we all know how many folks migrated after, especially during COVID and after COVID. And they funded the program. That contract has ended. So we're going to go back to how it used to be fee-based for the SEOs. And aside from that, obviously sponsorships. That's something that myself and the committee and the chamber leaderships works very closely with. Let me describe who is a good fit for the SEO program. And this is, I think, where you all are vital to this. First is obviously anybody who is a CEO, owner of their own company, C-level executive that has moved to Miami or the South Florida area. By the way, we've had folks from Broward, though the events are all in Miami. So as long as they feel they can make that commute and that commitment, we're open to that. And as far as how long they've moved here, we're very flexible on that. There are folks that we've had that have joined the program that have been in Miami 5 months. Others have been here 3 or 4 years, but haven't been as engaged with the community as they've wanted to. And so we're very flexible on that timing. Conversely, the other bucket that works is those that are maybe have lived in Miami, have been newly promoted in one of these C-level CEO positions and wants to get more involved in the community. So there's 2 buckets, I would say. And so where we need your help is, as HR executives, I'm sure that you're coming across a lot of these executives moving down or folks that have been newly promoted. And we would love your recommendations or referrals. We have always gotten great opportunities and recommendations from the board. And again, it was such a pleasure to talk to you all today and have you all kind of in this webinar to discuss this. I don't want to take up too much time and going through a lot of more details on it. What I will say is I'm going to leave in the chat my email address and my cell number. Of course, Alicia and Stephanie and Tanya have my information. And if you come across anybody that you think is a good fit, you want to run it by me, please feel free to reach out. And by the way, at that point, if we think it's a good fit, we'll do the heavy lifting on getting in touch with them, the programs and the details of the program. Our next cohort starts April 3rd at Vizcaya. It's always fabulous. We'll be recruiting up to that time. And we also have another fall cohort. So a lot of opportunities to join the program next year. So again, please reach out and thank you so much and have a great webinar today. I hope to see many of you tomorrow. And if not, happy holidays. Thank you so much.
With that, thank you, Gladys. With that, we're going to start our program. I'm going to turn it over to Robert Ortiz, who is my co-chair of this committee. He's the Senior Vice President of People and Culture Americas at Amadeus North America. And with that, Robert, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Aaron. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Aaron mentioned earlier, this is the second installment of our 4-part HR series. A very riveting topic today, and I'm really, really privileged and honored to introduce our 2 well-distinguished panelists. First, let me introduce to you Rizel Larrea Alvarez, who's a 2-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and former investigative producer for CBS News in Miami, with a foundation at Deloitte and over 35 years of experience across industries. As a facilitator and trainer, she uses appreciative inquiry framework to help teams connect, navigate, change, and achieve meaningful outcomes. She's taught negotiation workshops at Babson College and worked with Fortune 100 companies. Guided by David Copperwriter's quote, "Words can create words create realities, questions shape our futures. Rizel sees questions as powerful tools to unlock ideas and possibilities. Her favorite go-to during a facilitation negotiation is "How might we?" A question that encourages collaboration, creativity, and action. So thank you, Rizel, for joining the panel today. And also a good close friend and colleague of mine, Lauren Blandon. Lauren is the global head of organizational development and talent management at advertising powerhouse MVL, the world's largest creative company. And with over 17 years of HR expertise across industries, including SaaS, healthcare, and FMCG, Lauren stands out as a force in the field. Previously serving as CHRO, head of L&D, HR operations, and more, she has navigated the complexities of the talent landscape for some of the globe's leading companies like SAP and SAB Miller. Recognized for her insightful musings on the state and future of work, Lauren brings a very distinctive perspective to the table, positioning herself as the go-to for innovative strategies, all underscored by a penchant, for constructive disruption. Lauren holds a degree in organizational psychology. She serves on the board of advisors for the Center of Leadership at FIU and a proud Miami native. Both of you, Lauren and Rizel, thank you for joining the panel today. So before we get started, as I've done in prior meetings, let me just share a little background information for our audience. In McKinsey's 2023 State of Organizations research, 20% of the more than 2,500 people polled that they were concerned about the lack of community in their organizations. And among the top reasons employees gave for leaving a job where they did not feel they were truly valued and appreciated, and they didn't feel a sense of belonging. And now that we're operating in a world of hybrid and remote work, both on and off-site employees are looking for more connectivity, more purpose, and a sense of how and where they fit into a company's long-term talent strategy. And when workers don't find these things in an organization, they disengage, retention takes a hit, and performance and productivity can suffer. And in fact, McKinsey's research on employee productivity suggests that employee disengagement could cost a median-sized S&P 500 company between $228 million and $355 million per year in lost productivity. If you think about that, that is again a staggering statistic. So, panelists, and feel free to jump in here. When we discuss some of these questions, and I think they're going to be very important for our participants today to get your insight. First question: what types of changes are HR professionals and executives experiencing and having to lead their teams through? And as you're answering that, maybe you can discuss which are most relevant today and which might be more relevant in the coming mid to long term. And Rizel, maybe we'll start with you, and then we'll get Lauren's input on that.
Well, thank you, Robert. It's such an honor to be here with you and with Lauren and with everyone else that's here. I am passionate about this topic. As a child from the ages of 5 to 8, to give you some perspective, I lived in 3 countries, 4 cities, and went to three different types of schools. One based in communism, grounded in communism in Cuba, one grounded in religion in Spain, and the other here, capitalism in the US. And so why is this relevant? Why am I sharing this? Is because I'm okay with change, right? I'm happy navigating change. And why is it relevant is because the question I pose is, how are we framing change, right? And I love this topic because we're not just going through a lot of change, but at the speed of change that we're going through. And Eric Teller, which is a longtime executive at Google X, a couple of years ago introduced the idea that change is happening today faster than human beings can adapt. Now think about that for a second, right? The world outside of us is changing faster than we can adapt. And so my question is that I ask myself every day, and I talk it over with my clients is, what is happening inside of us? And normally when you ask this question, people normally respond stress, self-doubt. And so why does this matter? And it matters for the bottom line, because if we're looking into potential of our team members to produce the bottom line, we need people to be creative, to be connected, to be engaged. And so neuroscience tells us and guides us a lot in ways where we can be more engaged, be more connected. And I want to stop right there because I can go on and on forever. And I'm just excited to also listen to what Lauren has to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rizal. I think I mean, I was going to mention too the rate of change. I mean, change has always been a constant. At one point we were talking about VUCA, forever. It was like the top headline. So it's always been a thing, but you hit it, spot on when you said that it's the rate is unique. When we look at just technological advances and all of the other things, it's gone from sort of this steady line to this sharp increase. And what's interesting is that it's really an even playing field across generations, across economies, across geographies of all of us experiencing it at the same time, and navigating it together. So in that sense, there's really no one that has a leg up on some of these things that are coming out. We're all kind of fumbling with it at the same time. But I mean, I think to Robert's question around what specific kinds of changes are we as HR leaders or just business leaders kind of facing, I think I'm actually in the middle of finalizing my kind of predictions for 2025 article, which I'm going to post to LinkedIn later this week. I think some of the things I'm looking at next year is we're going to see, after a couple of years of feeling confident that hybrid and remote was here to stay, and I kept saying, don't, the pigs haven't flown on that yet. Sure enough, I think we're going to see a huge return to office mandate. I think employers and leaders are really going to leverage their power back in this really tight job market to start mandating those things. So we're going to have to navigate that. And then the reactions to it, sort of the rage applying, right? So people are going to be really upset. They're going to start looking for new opportunities. They're going to start demanding a lot of wellness support, where if you're going to make me go in the office, then I need you to support my mental and health and just well-being. So I think those are some of the things we'll see immediately. In the long term, I think that organizational structures are really going to start to change because of new tech and AI. We're already kind of seeing I don't want to say elimination of middle managers, but sort of the reduction in those kinds of roles. So there's going to be some fundamental structural, I think, things in the next couple of years that we're going to have to start managing through. And with digital currencies, we're going to start seeing a lot more globalization of the workforce, who we're competing against for jobs. So I think some big shifts.
Thank you. Those are huge, huge shifts. So second question, and I know we spoke about this a bit, and this one we could probably speak about for hours, which we don't have the time to do, but are humans naturally resistant to change? And then maybe you can share some examples to demonstrate whatever your philosophy is when it comes to the human element of change.
And so, Robert, I think it's the meaning we give to change. We go back to meaning, right? To what meaning, how are we framing change? Again, for me, change, I'm not resisting to change. And what I think is important for corporations to do, one, I always try to look back in history, who's doing what and who's done what extraordinary, right? And for me, I look at NASA and President Kennedy when he gave his speech of putting a man on the moon, right? That was purpose. That was clear purpose. We're going to put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, and we're going to bring him home safely. There's such clear purpose that brings people together. And when you have such clear purpose in an organization, it ties with identity. It brings in people together. There's a sense of belonging, and then we're all going in this lane to achieve this. And I think with those things happened, you're able to better navigate the resistance of change.
Yeah, and I'll come in, and just so everyone sort of knows where my brain is at when so I'm a social kind of psychologist by nature. I actually taught social psych at FIU for a couple of years. So just general human behavior is something that I'm super nerdy about. And then I've spent the last almost 9 years working in marketing and advertising, and really having a kind of a first row seat to see how some of the biggest brands in the world essentially are trying to manage change, right? And I've kind of come to the conclusion that folks aren't really resistant to change. They're resistant to threats, right? So when a change poses a potential threat to their safety, to their ego, to their convenience, or some kind of upside that they currently experience, and there's a threat that that's going to go away, that's when they resist it. So it's really not the change, because I've seen, people get really quickly on board with things when there's something very clearly in it for them, right? So it's really not the change. And I always cite, brands like Apple and Nike and these brands that are really able to get folks to camp out outside of their stores, waiting to pay for the latest gadget, the latest innovation, the latest change, right? So not only are people on board, but they're now inconveniencing themselves, waiting for it, paying for it. So I look at change as more of, is what we're doing introducing some level of threat or uncertainty that people are going to perceive as a threat? And that's really what they're reacting to, in my experience.
Question though, and again, just very quickly, I want you, Lauren, maybe if I go to you for a moment to expound on that. So when you look at your 2025 predictions, particularly when you talk, for instance, about an RTO mandate and the reactions to that, and that threat to ego, to whatever the threat is, their well-being. I mean, what is that resistance in your sort of crystal ball? What does that resistance look like then? I mean, what is your prediction when it comes to that?
Yeah. So I think first folks are going to assess the landscape and calculate to what degree they have leverage to resist and fight back, right? Because it's really sort of a tug of war, and it's who has the upper hand. If you look at first, a few years ago when we were forced to go remote, I often joke around about this. So at that time, I was in a chief people officer role. So I was very much kind of leading this charge of getting everyone to all of a sudden from one day to the other work fully from home, right, remotely in this way that we never had before. If someone had given me a heads up about that change, let's say 6 months prior, I would have spent the whole 6 months a change management plan and like really frankly over engineering the hell out of what was to come. We got this right between February to March. We went from this thing that we heard about on the other side of the world to all of a sudden it's here and we need to, lock down. And we figured it out is kind of my point, right? Like, because folks were like, great, you want me to work from home? Awesome, I'm in. They figured it out. They figured out the technology overnight. Like it was just so quick because something was in it for them. They loved the idea of working from home. Now, the other way around is going to be a challenge. I think that it's beneficial for organizations that the job market is kind of tough, so people kind of don't have a choice. But I do still anticipate they're going to say, okay, fine, I'll go in, I'm going to play along, but I want you to support me in these other ways, right? And we're going to start seeing some accountability being held across leaders to do things like support your mental well-being and those kinds of things.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. So this leads us then into our next question about the facilitation of change as we see the landscape changing in the workforce. So in your opinion, what qualities should leader possess to facilitate the change? And when we talk about qualities, we're talking about leadership mindsets that are poised to lead that change. So whether it's trust, transparency, integrity. Rizal, I'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Lauren.
Yeah, and so Robert, I love this question. I teach a workshop on conscious leadership, and the purpose of that workshop is to create awareness of one of the questions that I ask is for leaders. How are you best as a leader? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And then how are you at your worst as a leader? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? To be aware of our influence as leaders that we're having on ourselves and then also in the team, I think it's something that is fundamental in how we're going to navigate this change. And then understanding also the state, right, of where our team members are at. Lauren was talking about the threat of change earlier. Well, where is our team? How do we get them if we're meeting them at a state of threat? How do we get them to adaptability, to agility, to resilience? What kind of tools do they need? And in my belief and in my experience, it starts with the leaders having the self-awareness of where they're at. So then they can have the empathy and the understanding and the eye to cue in, hey, this is what's happening. And it's quick. I'm not talking about years or, it's just a matter of take a deep breath. We're all breathing anyways, right? The magical breath work that has the ability to change, right, our state it's amazing. The second thing I think is just that breath work. And I'll share, a lot of us are familiar, and if you're not, with this book called Atomic Habits. And so Atomic Habits, there's a part in Atomic Habits that he talks about what's the difference between an elite tennis player, and mind you, I don't play tennis, right? I don't want to give people the wrong impression, but what's the difference between an elite tennis player, a winner, and then one who's not? And it's very minor. And what I guess the research determined is those that are the elite, the winners, know how to breathe as the ball comes back, as they're hitting the ball, meaning they're present, they're centered, and that's the edge. And so I'd love to see more corporations to really take advantage of teaching, and when we talk about wellness, focusing on teaching on just breathing. We don't have to do a whole lot of stuff, because the more apps we give people, the more things we give people, it just doesn't work. It's more stuff, right? One breath, take a deep breath in for a count of 5, take a deep breath out for a count of 5, through your nose every time, and that it works magical. And the third thing is the language we choose. What language are we choosing when we are communicating with ourselves? Because we have that inner critic, at least I do when I'm in this field, right? And also, what language are we using with our teams, right? Questions definitely shape our futures. They can either be depleting questions or they can be generative. So I'll stop right there. And
can I ask you a question, though? And thank you for that. I don't mean to interrupt you. So a couple of things. So I'm going to expound a little bit. So give us the difference between that a degenerative question versus one that has the opposite impact, just for the benefit of our audience.
You did ask that question a while. I love this question. So let's say you're having in a situation, you're at work, there's a lot of deadline going on, and something happened with an employee and didn't go right. Why did you do that? Why did that happen? That tends to put us right back here, right, in a state of protection. Normally, if you think about this, right, when you ask those why questions in those instances and in that context, we get protective. We all do, right? Here's how that's depleting. Now, let me share with you one that's a generative question, which is my favorite. Hey, how might we prevent this from happening next time? And what happens with how might we, especially as a leader, it's now you and me. It's implied in the question, how might you and me, how might us, right? And then it just taps into this part of the brain, right, which is the cognitive, the creative.
Okay. One other question, then I'll go to Lauren. And apologies, I'm intrigued a little by this thought. And obviously, as a corporate trainer who works with different companies, my question is, can these qualities be taught and learned? And I know we didn't discuss this, but I'm interested to get your thoughts on those.
If you're talking about the breathing part, right? Yes, we're breathing already. So I think we got that. What I'm really hoping to hone in on, right, is to be conscious about our breathing, if we're holding our breath or not, right? And then as far as the questions, this is the work that I do, and I encourage and invite us all. Next time, just go, how might we? And pause. Finish your sentence and just pause and allow the individual to process. Chances are, initially, if you're saying these questions the first time, they'll go, oh, wait, I didn't get a why. Their brain might be going a little different, but it's magical the way it works. I do this every single day.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, please share.
I love the how might we. It's core actually to the skill I was going to cite that is important for leaders, which is just a human-centered. It's a way of, it's a practice, human-centered design, but it's also just sort of a way of thinking, and it just really entails an ability to put your audience at truly at the center of whatever's going on and see things clearly from their perspective. What are the implications for that person? Why do they care? Right? What are the things that there is going to keep them up at night? What is going to get them to buy? Um, and that's something that we can build, right? You can kind of build the habit of putting yourself into the shoes of either an actual person or create sort of a persona in your mind that is representative of your people, and think about what does this mean for them, have a clear understanding of that, and then effectively be an effective storyteller to bring that persona or that person on board, with what you're trying to do from their perspective, right? I had this manager years ago that used to say something all the time, and it always stuck in my brain. When we were explaining to him, where we were at with the project, and we sort of got too much in the weeds, he'd pause us and say, "Tell me what time it is, not how the clock works." Right. And it taught me that, right, you have to learn to tailor, right? This person, he's in a leadership capacity, he's juggling a lot of things. He just wants to know the time. He doesn't need to know who said what and where things are at. And it was this aha moment really early on in my career of crafting everything that I do and say from the perspective of what does this person care about? What do they need to know versus what is just making me feel better to maybe say, or what is just my perspective. So I think, leaders that are going to really be successful in navigating change are going to do those two things. They're going to really clearly understand their audience, what's in it for them, what do they want to hear, what is important to them, and then craft really impactful stories around it.
Thank you. Same question as I share with Rizal. Can these qualities, can these skills be taught and learned? What's your
Yeah,
view on that?
I definitely think they can. I mean, I certainly feel like I've made some great progress over the years, really being intentional on crafting that. Though I have noticed that there's some leaders that just have this intuition around it that maybe others don't, right? It always seems to be top of mind. They always just seem to understand the right way. They understand the importance of optics in terms of timing, their word choice, and they just are able to navigate that with a lot more ease. So I do find that some people just have that chip a little bit more sharpened, but I think you can build it over time.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Okay, so next question. From your perspective, what are the top 3 strategies leaders should adopt to assist their teams through the spectrum of change? And this sort of a second part of that is, are there any differences regardless of the size of the company or the employer? And I think, Lauren, I'm going to start with you first. I'll go to Rizal next.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think that change managing it does get harder the larger the organization is. I was actually just reading a post yesterday on LinkedIn where someone was citing that, when a startup enters kind of like that 30 to 50 employees, that's where communication starts to break down, right? Prior to that, everyone sort of has room to sit at the table. Everyone's part of every decision, every conversation. And that's where you start getting layers and an in group versus an out group. And then it just kind of gets a little bit more difficult from there, right? I've worked for smaller organizations, larger, and making decisions, making change could either feel like a jet ski, right? They're able to kind of quickly maneuver, or now we need to turn a huge cruise ship around, and that's going to take time, because now it's sort of a game of telephone. You're cascading messages. You're hoping by the time it gets to the end, it's the original intention of it. So I think size does make a difference, but some strategies, what I try to get HR folks, especially because I think, and listen, I'm an HR person. For years, we've talked about change management in sort of this pessimistic, like this burdensome thing. Oh, how do we get right? And we have the storming, norming, and forming, and all these very heavy. We go into it from a place almost of just like fear or anticipating that, oh, this is going to go badly. How do we, right? That's the conversation. And then when I saw how brands do it, right? They're like, all right, we're going to release a new product or this new change. Their conversations are very proactive and exciting. How do we get people to see this and feel it and buy into it? And it's like this really uplifting conversation that gets everyone excited. And I'm like, why don't we do more of that, right? If we go in, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we go into change expecting people the worst, sometimes it's sort of, anyone that has, is a caregiver to a toddler, a lot of times when they fall, the first thing they do is they look at you to see how you're reacting before they determine if they're going to start screaming, crying, or if they're going to get up and dust themselves off, right? They look and they're like, is this a big deal? No? Okay, right? So I think sometimes we need to, one of the strategies is go into it with this more optimistic, how do we create, I'm a big fan of creating FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So instead of imposing this change and having a tone in our messaging that, okay, guys, we know this is hard, but we trust, already people are like, oh, it is hard. Oh, now we're creating this, right? If instead, if we're like, this is awesome, like if you want to be a part of this, jump on the train while you can. Right now it's this fear of missing out on this change. You're like, oh shit, maybe I do need to get on board with that. So I think that's one strategy, you know, the positive reinforcement, and again, the human-centered approach.
Okay, terrific. Rizel, and then another question for Lauren, but I'm going to let Rizel, you jump in, and then I'm going to go back to Lauren.
Oh, Lauren, I just love that answer. And I'll, you know, it's interesting because I'm going to go back to, right, what I said earlier was, how are we framing the conversation of change, right? How are we framing that? We could frame it in a positive way, in an appreciative way, or we can reframe it in a depleting way. For me, I think one of the key things is where is our mission and purpose, right? How embedded is an organization's mission and purpose aligned with the entire organization? And we go back to, you know, I go back to NASA. There was an individual in NASA who was a PR individual, and he was, I forget his name, he was also a journalist. And he was, you know, I don't know, there's a story that JFK went into NASA and looked at a janitor, and he asked the janitor, "What are you doing here?" And the janitor says, "I'm putting a man on the moon, Mr. President." Now, mind you, if that's a real story or an urban legend, the idea is this: purpose and mission and identity. That even the janitor, whether it's true or not, in the organization will feel that sense of identity and belonging. And I think, right, I think that organizations should collaborate on with their marketing departments, or, you know, reach out to Lauren and hire the company that she works for to start really creating these intentional, purposeful campaigns that people feel belonging and they feel a part of. And then we solve the McKinsey, you know, statistics as the beginning, right? So I think that's one. And second, for the teams is really for corporations to implement those breathing techniques in the moment. It gets us present. And to navigate change, we need to be present, to be able to discern what's what and what's not in the moment. And lastly, one of my favorite things is, how are we designing our meetings, our conversations with each other, with our teams, in a way that's inclusive of all our voices? I really think that the old, you know, and I'm turning 60 at the end of the month. So I came up working in, you know, in the late 80s and 90s out of Deloitte. This was the sage on the stage, right? Where the leader knew it all. Look, that's not today's world. It's not possible. So how are we designing conversations where as leaders, we're okay with that, and we're okay with guiding and facilitating curiosity and empowering our teams to think, asking generative questions? And I will stop right there. That's
No, this, and actually, if I can expand on that, because
Please.
you know, and
ahead.
it kind of relates to Ken in the chat was asking about also rate of change and how it may fundamentally just change the need for different layers of leadership. And I think it speaks to Rizel's point about instilling. I think it's going to be important to in order to meet the rate and demand of change, to eliminate layers. And that means the implication of that is what Rizel's, right? How do we instill, it's sort of the quote, which I butcher all the time and I need to remember it because I reference it all the time, but it's sort of, if you want to build a ship, don't dole out tasks and give people kind of, you know, just tasks to remember, but rather teach them to long for the sea, right? And it's implied there that if you at least get people rallied around a common vision and mission, they'll figure out the rest, right? And then now they're, you know, you empower them. Don't worry about how they do it, just that we're all going to the same, you know, in the right direction. So I think it's really important to start empowering folks as we're going to start seeing a lot more self-directed teams And to pull that off successfully, we do need people to understand have a shared kind of vision and North Star together.
Lauren, I'm going to put you on the spot, and you're going to hate me for doing this, and you can you can tell me whatever you want after the webinar, because you obviously you published something on LinkedIn, and I wanted, and again, apologies that I didn't ask you this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And it's interesting, as part of the announcement for this, you wanted to, you're a public speaker, you're on the circuit quite regularly, and you echo the sentiment that change management is dead. What exactly did you mean by that quote? And apologies for putting you on the spot, but I
This is
think
great.
it's important that you expound on that, and I'll let Rizel jump in as well. So
yeah, I think it's precisely what we've been saying here. That's sort of the textbook, kind of structured change management that we've all kind of been schooled on, in our profession. It just doesn't resonate anymore, right? It's not the most effective way to actually get people on board. As Rizel said, the message holders aren't just the top anymore. I think folks actually now are more likely to, I don't want to say discredit, but they sort of, when we want to get a message across, our senior leaders may make the initial announcement because that's just sort of par for the course, but then we know it needs to be reinforced at a peer level, right? That we have what I call learnfluencers across the organization, but just influencers. These are just people that maybe don't have people responsibility or a fancy big title, but people listen to them. People are engaged with them. They have a gravitas to them. That's where change now is coming from. It's very grassroots, kind of bottom up. So I think just a lot of the fundamentals of what I call textbook change management are not tried and true anymore.
Terrific, thank you. Rizel, any comment? Again, this is pretty impromptu, but
yeah. So I have, for the longest time, right? And even to today, we look at, hey, if my computer is not going fast enough, or not working fast enough, let's get a new one. We're upgrading always for scaling and efficiency, and it's either the processes or the systems or the computers or the technology. What I'm inviting us all to take a look at is the technology within our own brains, right? Neuroscience, there's so much information with neuroscience right now. And to really hone in and take a step back and say, wait a minute, if my team is functioning under stress and I am not, that is taking a hit on the creativity and production, then how do I get them from stress to the outcomes that I want them to have in change, which is adaptability, agility, and resilience, right? How do we get there? How do we build that bridge? And to, on every moment, because stress can hit us at any moment, change can come at any moment. In any given moment, how do we look and get a pulse on, hey, where's this person needing to be? Where do I need to be more efficient? And that's what I'm really extremely excited about, really honing in. And the last thing I'll say with that is, I take a look at people, like, whether is their, are they functioning in the reptilian part of the brain? Are they functioning in the cognitive part? And how do I get them from there to here as quickly as I possibly can so they can be more productive? Because that, when people talk about, hey, we need to be at our highest potential, truest potential. These are great coaching words. Be your best self. That's what being our best self is. Understanding where we're navigating and which part of our brains we are activating. And so I'll stop right there because I can talk about this forever.
Terrific. I have two more questions. One of them, but this one is another impromptu question as well. And I'm going to just ask very quickly, get your opinion on who ultimately owns change management? We're talking about a building ready culture. I mean, is it HR? Is it leadership? Is it employee? Lauren, you talked about a bottom-up approach. So who ultimately owns the change cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a shared responsibility. I know that HR, we've gotten in the habit of, we quickly say, we're not responsible for culture. That's the leaders. We're not right? And I'm like, well, we have to be responsible for something. So I'm going to claim on behalf of our function that we are partially responsible, though we like to try to pass the buck to leaders. But I think it's whoever really is winning from the change, right? At the end of the day, the change is going to benefit someone. Someone is triggering it because it's needed or is going to gain some, right? So ultimately the ball's in their court. And then it's your key stakeholders that are your partners in doing that.
Terrific. Rizal, your thoughts on that?
I practice appreciative inquiry, and appreciative inquiry is a change framework. And how they look at change is bringing all your stakeholders in, right? It's not just one person's responsibility. I mean, we go back to Eric Teller, and change is moving so rapidly right now that we can't keep up with. And we look at no longer being this, the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side. We've got to bring all our stakeholders in, design conversations where we bring HR in, where we bring marketing in, where we bring IT in, and hear what change means for them, identify what that means for them. Because I can assure you, change for IT is different than for accounting. That I can assure you, and how the meaning that they give to it. I mean, ultimately, it's HR, but I don't think it's all on HR. I think there needs to be conversations with the whole system, the whole living system.
Thank you. So final question for you both before we take a look at the webinar chat. I'm looking for some questions, and I encourage the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to share them. Now's a good opportunity. If you had to describe in one word or more than one word the leadership competency that organizations will value the most in order to have the most profound impact on the change elements for their future workforces, what would it be? And not only what would it be, but why? Open question to either one. Who wants to go first? Lauren.
So I will go first. Like, I think I've been trying to warn folks to not be so quick to determine or decide what a uniquely human skill is going to be with AI, because I'm hearing a lot of kind of like what will be that ultimate competency or skill of the future. And I'm hearing things like creativity, empathy, et cetera, that I think are going to continue to be important, but I'm also seeing AI getting increasingly good at those things. I would imagine in the short term better than most humans at those things. So that's one thing too that I just want to throw out to the audience is let's not be quick to discount some of those things as uniquely human. But I think what will be really important for leaders is locus of control. So locus of control kind of refers to, folks sort of differ and are on a spectrum on whether they tend to navigate life thinking things happen at them, right? They're more likely to believe in things like destiny and fate, that things are just sort of out of their hands and just sort of happen, sort of a passenger approach. And then there's other folks that are very much bull by the horns. I control my destiny and I'm right. So I think that latter, that locus, having an inner locus of control, really strong one, is going to be something that helps leaders really be optimistic, proactive, and stay in charge of all of the things that are happening. Because I find that folks and leaders that have more of the former, right, the external, they kind of are just, I don't know, they're not ready to grab it and see the opportunity and the things that are presenting themselves. So that's one that I'll cite is locus of control.
A follow-up question to that, but I want to go to Redzel first. I'll go to Redzel and get her input, and then I'll come back to you on the AI question. So,
so I can't answer that, unfortunately, in one word, but I can in three.
Okay.
And so pause, right? Breathe, and be mindful of your language and making sure, right, you are framing the conversations in a generative way. Because the reality is we can frame it in a positive or negative, however you want to take a look at it. What truly matters is the direction and the output that you're going to receive from the individual you're having a conversation with the individuals you're leading. I think that is going to be huge because we need everyone's voices in, right? Because AI is going to take care of all the fast stuff, take care of all these things. What we're going to be left with is this amazing amount of brain space to create. Right? And so pause, breathe. If it works for elite tennis players, it works for the rest of us. And then just be mindful of our language and asking questions.
Terrific. So with that, I think we've concluded. Let me just check the webinar chat. I do have one question for you, Lauren, which I will get to in 2 seconds, because I don't want to open up the AI discussion, because we've all referenced AI in our last webinar. It became a huge discussion. We've been asked to do a part 2 to that as far as skills for the future. Very quickly, Lauren, before we go, and I'm going to check the webinar chat for more questions. You talked about AI and its ability to basically start to adapt human qualities. So in 2 minutes, the 2-3 minutes that we have left, what are you seeing in that space, or what are you? I mean, and this is for you, Rizel, as well. What are you seeing in that space, and what are the implications for these competencies? Again, we're not going to box everyone into a competency, but what is your prediction as you look into the future about AI and its capability to adopt what we're discussing now about the change from a human
Yeah.
quality perspective?
Yeah, and this one can get a little bit philosophical. So I think, you know, AI is becoming increasingly better at now. Where I say it tends to get philosophical is obviously AI doesn't feel. So when we say that it's empathetic, well, it doesn't actually feel empathy. And my my response to that is, does it matter? Because it's really damn good at pretending that it does, right? And so, and as we see people interact with AI, I've kind of been, observing at people's openness to receive it. And what we're seeing even in my company, when we look at how consumers are interacting with different AI agents and things, they kind of don't care as long as it's helpful and it sounds like it's listening to them. They're like, okay, cool, I'm in. So we actually just launched, and we piloted it and then now launched an AI coach for across our workforce. So we're using Valence as our vendor. They've named their AI coach Nadia. And Nadia is we've trained her on our core values, on our career conversation framework, all these kinds of things. And now Nadia is there on demand when folks are like, hey, I'm having a really hard time with a peer. She'll say, great, let's role play, let's chat this through. What's happening? And then over time, she starts to get to know your decision-making style, your preferences, your goals. And she'll call you out. She'll say, hey, I noticed that this is a recurring kind of thing that you've encountered with a lot of peers. Maybe we need to revisit that and look at maybe something internally that keeps resulting in this. So it's and this is in its infancy, really, right? So when I think about 5 years from now, what these agents and AI is going to be able to do in acting human, or at least serving human behaviors, I'm excited. I'm a little bit I don't want to say scared, but I'm like, where is this going to go? But I think it's
Sure.
really exciting stuff. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Rizel, your closing thoughts on the AI element.
I think AI is super exciting, right? One of the things that Lauren mentioned was in this chat how AI is listening to us, right? And we should be listening to that as well, in that our teams, our people, we want to be heard, seen, and understood. And if AI can build that to make us happier and to make our teams happier so they're more creative, oh my gosh, bienvenido, bring it on.
Terrific. Well, first and foremost, thank you both for your insights and your time today. It was a pleasure, obviously, sharing these moments with you and the preparation as well. There is one question in the chat. I think we've answered all the question in the chat. Lauren, if you can share, what is the name of the AI training vendor that you used again? Maybe you can just share
Valence.
Valence. Okay,
Yep.
Terrific. So just make sure that the team as well. Thank you so much. I want to encourage everyone that's on this session today to please monitor the Chamber's website, because we still have 2 more webinars. Also, we have our annual HR event, HR Insights, next April 27th. The date has already been established, so more details will follow on that as well. But again, thank you so much. If you have additional comments, please do not forget to submit them to us so we can have the panelists review them and provide their responses. And again, I want to wish you all a happy holidays. Aaron, I don't know if you're still on. We've got a couple minutes. I can hand it back over to you if you want. If not, we can close the session. Let me know whichever way you want to go. We ended a bit earlier than we expected.
If somebody
Is he
will
still
put,
on? There we go. Terrific.
okay,
You back on? There you go. Cool.
hang on if I've done this right. So
Okay, you have.
I want to thank Robert. I want to thank Lauren. I want to thank Rizal. I want to thank CareerSource and Diana for their support of these programs always. I want to thank Barry University again for the SHRM credits. Please sign up. Alicia can provide you with the information, and Tiffany Malvine, who puts that together for us. Lastly, I want to say, as Robert said, look for our webinars in the next year. We'll do 2 more at least. That's our hope in 2025 before we sunset for the summer. And our live program, HR Insights, is April 24th at the Coven Center. We hope to see you all there. On behalf of our entire committee and Robert and myself and Alicia and the rest of the chamber, we wish everybody a wonderful and safe holiday season and the blessings of the new year. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.